Before we get into this, I should probably address why the hell make a Grand Theft Auto 3 weapon tier list? It's almost 2020 at the time of making this video. Well, as much of you probably know, Grand Theft Auto Rockstar recently came out with the Definitive Edition. It's a disaster of a release, and it's really drawn a lot of attention to the original games. I myself have been playing the original games since the release of the Definitive Edition, and some of the quality of life features that they implemented in the Definitive Edition was having a weapon wheel, a modernized weapon wheel, just like in Grand Theft Auto 5, 4, that it's a physical wheel that you can go directly across, pick whatever weapon you want. Well, in the original games, you didn't have that. I mean, there is sort of a wheel, so to speak, but you can't cut directly across the circle. It's more of a ribbon. You can go to the left or the right, and everything has a predetermined position of where it lives on the weapon wheel. And if you were to include every single weapon in the game, you have no control over where any of the weapons go. Like, this is the weapon wheel, just so that you can see all the weapons on it. And honestly, not every weapon is even worth including on this weapon wheel. There's certain weapons on here that are actually a detriment to you just by having them on your weapon wheel. So what this tier list is going to do is I'm going to try to the best of my ability to rank each weapon individually as how good it is as a weapon. What sort of value does it bring to you including it on your weapon wheel? And then where it lives on the weapon wheel, sort of the meta of having it versus not. And that's about it. Let's get into it. So I'm going to go from best to worst. So we're going to start with best weapon in the game. You probably guessed it, it's the rocket launcher. If you played any amount of time in this game, you know how damn good the rocket launcher is. You can play without it, but it's one of those, especially with helicopters, police helicopters, it almost feels necessary to bring around a rocket launcher just to knock them out of the sky. That's kind of where the meta starts and ends with the rocket launcher, other than it just being a damn good weapon. If you look at the weapon's stats, it doesn't really accurately reflect how good explosions are in the game or how much damage explosions do, or the fact that this is an area of effect weapon with a pretty high rate of fire. It's not like crazy, but you can, if you're crazy with aiming and truly making the best use out of this rate of fire, I mean, you can lob explosives everywhere, take out crowds of people coming at you. And the other thing is, if you are truly skilled at aiming, you can aim the rocket launcher further enough away from you where the area of effect kills people around you, but it doesn't actually hurt yourself. That's the biggest drawback of this weapon, is that you use it point blank, something right next to you, and you blow yourself up, and it's not going to kill you, but it's going to do a whole bunch of damage. Other than that, I mean, this is easily the best weapon in the game. In the hands of a skilled user, it is maybe the only weapon you need in the game, and even in the hands of a novice, it's still damn good. It's right near the end of the weapon wheel in terms of its placement. It's really not going to get in the way of much, but it very much establishes a meta of where things start to go, with it being one of the best weapons in the game, and you're holding yourself back if you're not including it. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's the first weapon we're talking about, and it's great in a vacuum. I mean, mows people down. Now let's go to the next weapon. It's the M16. If you look at the weapon's stats, it truly captures how much of a monster this weapon is. Like, I can't even, I haven't done the math to actually figure out how many rounds per second it unloads, but it has a clip of 60, and it seems like that just evaporates in a second or two. And each of those bullets does 50 damage, and so you only need 1 to 2 bullets to actually kill somebody out of a round of 60, which just goes and all the bullets are gone. This weapon is very good. It actually does the majority of what the rocket launcher does, so it really deserves to be second place to the rocket launcher, just maybe even first, because it does everything that the rocket launcher does, a little bit worse. You can take out helicopters with it. You can aim in first person. The first person aiming is a bit crazy because of the jostling that the reticle does when you shoot it. And at first when I was using it, I thought, yeah, you know, like, this weapon's really good, but you kind of have to be somewhat skilled to use it. Not really, because the thing that the M16 can do that the rocket launcher can't is that you can use it outside of first-person aiming. You can just hold down the fire button and use the movement directions to aim, pivot your character, and you can just mow people down at the full range that this weapon has. You know, all you have to do is aim horizontally. There's some aspect of vertical auto aim where it's just gonna, you know, I can't tell you exactly how high you can hit people or how low you can hit people relative to you, but yeah, you just hold down the fire button, pivot yourself around, you can mow down people. Even though each bullet, it has the traditional bullets where bullets don't penetrate, you know, once it hits somebody, then it goes into them. But because you're shooting out 60 rounds per second, you can easily mow down multiple targets, no problem. This is like your delete button. Anybody close to mid-range, you just hold this button down and immediately take them out. It can also evaporate weapons. It's actually so powerful versus vehicles, cars, that once a car starts to catch fire, you can continue to shoot it to make it blow up faster, but there will oftentimes be a glitch where you'll actually cause the car to explode twice, because first it'll explode because you shot it so many times that it just exploded, but then there's also a timed explosion once it catches on fire, and sometimes this will also happen. So, I mean, this can either be a boon or detriment depending on how close this vehicle actually is to you. Considering the range on this weapon, you don't have to be close. It's great. Both of these weapons are like DPS incarnate. The best explosive and the best like projectile gun in the game. To me, no question. They're both very good. I would, you know, and the M16 is to the left of the rocket launcher. I'm gonna go actually show you where they live on the weapon wheel. But that's where they live. And so everything starts to kind of form around where they are. And now we get to the final weapon that I ranked in S tier, and that's the Uzi. The Uzi, I rank behind those two because in a vacuum, it's weaker than both of those weapons, but there's a damn good reason the Uzi makes it, and that's two things. The first is that you can run while holding it, and you can move freely, you know, walk speed while you're firing. And in that sense, it's the best, you know, like gun that you can use with those attributes, which makes it a great weapon to just have on you as you're running around. Somebody comes up to you, and so then you target them and you shoot them. And it's DPS that it does is very respectable. It's not like great, but essentially it's kind of a benchmark. Like, is this weapon as good as the Uzi in terms of its DPS, fire rate, all that sort of stuff? If it's better than the Uzi, then it's probably a pretty good weapon. If it's not as good, not so much. But if it's comparable, then it's like, yeah, this weapon does good DPS. The other thing that makes it great is the fact that it is the only weapon you can use for drive-bys. And so, I mean, you're pretty much required to use this weapon. The other two are so good that it would be really smart to put on the wheel, but like everybody and their mom's gonna have the Uzi. And in that sense, the Uzi is like almost even better than these two in terms of would you use it? Yeah, you're gonna use the Uzi, but in a vacuum, it's not quite as good as these two. The reason it gets this high, aside from everything I just mentioned, is the fact that the value of the Uzi in a drive-by is equal to the value of the vehicle. And you consider the type of vehicles you can have in this game. You can get tanks, you can do drive-bys in the tanks to stop people from arresting you. Tanks are slow, that's the one thing that's really gonna, and you know, the doors can get knocked off as easily as any other weapon. But, you know, do drive-bys as people approach you, and it sort of counteracts that. The other thing you can do is, like, you can take a cheetah from the Turismo mission, which is bulletproof, explosion-proof, fireproof. You can put it in your garage, and then you can do the taxicab glitch to make it damage-proof from collisions, and all of a sudden you have like this damage-proof cheetah, your steed, and your shield, but the Uzi is your sword in this situation, and it's damn good. The devastation you can do with it is crazy. It definitely deserves to be among top 3 weapons in the game. And now we're getting to the next one. This weapon, I like to say, is on the verge of greatness. That's the Flamethrower. It is really unique and truly crazy at what it can do. I think that the number one thing that should be talked about with the Flamethrower is the fact that it goes through everything. It is completely penetrating. It can penetrate through walls, it can penetrate through vehicles. It literally goes through everything. And so because of that, because of the range that it has, It's almost gets to mid-range. It's definitely a close-range weapon, but it's got a very nice range. If you see its stats, it feels like it's longer than, the 5 meters or whatever it says. But it's easily has the best ammo economy of any weapon in the game. It has a clip of 50. It goes down by about one, tick per second. So you can just hold this thing and fire for 50 seconds. And if you see the stats again, its reload speed is 0.1 seconds. That's not a typo. It's like the animation either doesn't exist or it's bugged. I mean, literally, you stop firing for a split second and then you keep firing again. So you can just literally just hold this weapon down and continuously fire, wheel yourself around. It's very difficult to miss with this weapon. It's just pure devastation. The thing that you should know about the flamethrower that's part of what kind of holds it back is the fact that the flames apply a damage over time to whatever target you hit. And every time you continuously hit it, it's not like you generate multiple stacks, it just restarts that stack, as far as I'm aware. So, once you stop hitting something with the flames, then, the damage over time starts and, will extinguish if it doesn't kill its target by the time the flames end. Well, for any NPC that I'm aware of, putting it on fire will kill it. The damage over time will kill it. The problem is, it's not really an instant kill. And on your lower wanted levels, and for pedestrians, you put somebody on fire, it affects the AI. They essentially start running around with their last few seconds of life before they burn to death. Well, on the higher levels of wanted, when you get to FBI agents, SWAT, police, army people,
young man,
they don't necessarily do that. They still have a window of time while burning alive to still kill you and shoot you. And so because of this, it's not like an instant delete button like the M16 is, or even the shotgun in certain situations. So this weapon, although it can take out 4 plus people at the same time, it's not necessarily going to stop you from taking damage. Now, if somebody's walking into your range and you put them on fire, you're most likely going to kill them before they do any, if much, damage to you. They might get a shot or two off on you, and then they'll burn to death. But in situations where, like, a car full of 4 people pulls up on you, you're going to have a hard time surviving that, even if you set all of them on fire with the flamethrower. They're probably going to kill you, and then after they're done killing you, then they're all going to die from damage over time. So that's kind of what holds this weapon back, is the fact that you can't just instantly kill people, but it's still very, very good. If you know that it can pass through walls and whatnot and use it in such a way, it's great. Flame's the only thing that can work against tanks, so it's great in that respect. And in terms of where it lives on the weapon wheel, it's to the right of the rocket launcher, so it has a pretty good place in terms of where it is. If you were, on the other side in the Uzi, you could potentially go to the opposite side to get to the flamethrower for a quick, close range weapon. It's in a pretty good spot. It's not really in the way of anything. It's totally unique. I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary to include, but it certainly has its uses. Now, here's another weapon which actually kind of does a lot of the things that the flamethrower does in a different way, is the grenade. This is easily one of the best weapons in the game, and I think oftentimes replaces the Uzi as being like the best weapon you can run with in the game. Because the thing about the Uzi is that it's a great all-around gun. You can instantly, take somebody out at close range, but it doesn't do a tremendous amount of damage, and it's not great for taking out vehicles. And you have to, even though you can go from running to walking, you have to take time to be able to do that stuff. With a grenade, you can be in full sprint, a car comes up to you, you just stop for a second to throw your grenade, even right in front of you, then just continue running, and because it's a timed explosion, you have time to get outside of the blast range of the explosion before it blows up, and then immediately blow up, the car that came at you, because it now, was in the position you were last in, which is where the grenade is, and so boom. So it allows you to basically put explosions right in front of you, but then gives you time to run out of the area to not hurt yourself with said explosion. I mean, that's something that the rocket launcher can't do. The rocket launcher, you have to aim it away from yourself, whereas the grenade, put it right in front of you, run away, and then that area blows up. And because it's essentially the best hit and run tactic weapon in the game. It's great. And it compared to like the flamethrower, an FBI car comes at you, you just throw a grenade and you run away, and they might get some shots off on you, as you're running, but you're creating distance, which is going to mitigate that. And then once the grenade blows up, the car blows up, they all die. So you as a character are very hard to deal with when you're just sort of running around. The grenade is great for that. The other thing the grenade does, although this is somewhat situational, is using it from above, like on top of a building and just throwing it down. Because granted, you could use a rocket launcher or any sort of weapon that you can aim downwards to shoot at people, but you expose yourself by sort of poking your head out to where people could potentially shoot you. Well, you throw a grenade over the edge of a building, nobody can do anything about it, not if you don't get close enough to the edge of the building. And so you can just rain grenades down on people, and they literally can't touch you. I mean, helicopters will fly over, but you take out the helicopters with a rocket launcher whenever they come by, and I mean, you're completely safe and can stay up there all day, racking up wanted stars if you want to. So this is, what's the point of that? Well, there are some missions where this could be relevant, like the one that comes to mind is Sayonara Salvatore. You can get up on the roof across the street from Luigi's club and just rain grenades down on Salvatore as he's getting out of there and blow him up before he even gets to his vehicle. So it's definitely got its uses. It's all around a pretty good weapon. It exists on a really great place on the weapon wheel. It's to the right of the flamethrower, so you could get around from it from the opposite side, from the fist, or you could go to the right of the flamethrower. And like I said, they're used in similar situations, so they exist in pretty good spots. You can run with the grenade. It's continuous with the fist and the Uzi, which are all run weapons, so that's sort of like your run area of where the weapons you can run with live, whereas everything else is stuff you can't run with. So it's important to know, how quickly can I get to a weapon that I can run with so that I can actually run away with. And grenades are a great hit and run tactic, so it's a great weapon to actually hold while you're running away. Now we get to the B tier. This weapon is very good. It's in some ways underrated, but it's weird. It's the AK-47. At one point, I kind of thought this weapon was better than it was. I was messing around with my controller settings, and I wasn't able to get full advantage of first-person shooting. If you're playing on the PC, then, I mean, you've got your mouse, so that's great for aiming. But for people who are maybe playing on a controller and not super comfortable with aiming, there's the lock-on weapon system, which is not great in this game. It replaces first-person aiming, but you end up targeting pedestrians, all sorts of things. Well, statistically, the AK-47 is closest to the Uzi. I mean, it's basically an Uzi clone. It actually does 1 less damage per bullet than the Uzi, but it has a faster rate of fire, a larger clip. So it's basically the Uzi. So it's like, why would you have the Uzi on a weapon that you can't run with, you can't do drive-bys with? What's the point? It's got an extended lock-on range. It has the same range that the M16 has. They're both assault rifles, but instead of having first-person aiming, you have lock-on targeting. So if you're a big fan of lock-on targeting, this is a great weapon. It's actually exists just to the right of the Uzi, so it's sort of, well, after the shotgun, it's sort of vying for that same spot as the M16, which makes sense. They're both assault rifles. And there is a situation where you could include both, since they're used differently. But the other thing you can do is, if you're very familiar with how weapons work in Grand Theft Auto, if you switch over to another weapon, before you reload, you can automatically reload your weapon. Well, since the Uzi and the AK-47 are right next to each other and very similar, you could potentially switch back and forth between the two weapons before you get to the reload, to switch back and forth to the two weapons and never have to reload. The reload time is about the same, switching from the Uzi to the AK, but you switch into a better weapon. And the AK has a longer reload, so switching over to the Uzi actually decreases your reload time. So that's a lot of micromanaging to do. And does that really make it, a better weapon than the M16? Absolutely not. I mean, its stats are closer to the Uzi with none of the features. So generally speaking, it's outclassed by the Uzi and by the M16. But if you're a huge fan of lock-on targeting, then this is potentially a weapon you can use. This is really where we're starting to get to the area of niche picks, and it's a niche pick. generally not great, but it's not bad. I mean, and it's great for missions in the game. It's, you know, competitive with the Uzi, so it's pretty good at just single target deletion. It's got a larger clip, it's got a huge range, so you can take out lots of people with a single clip very efficiently. Probably more efficiently than the M16, because it spits out bullets so fast that it's difficult to be efficient with it. Now we get to the Molotov Cocktail. I wanted to rank this lower. I have a thing against this weapon because it is very dangerous to have on your weapon wheel. I think that's the number one thing that you should know putting this on your weapon wheel is that you have a weapon that you can easily hurt yourself with. If you catch yourself on fire, it does 67 damage. If you don't have any armor, you have 100 health, that's 2/3 of your life. If you do have armor, that's 1/3. That's devastating. Like, the penalty of having this weapon is that you potentially hurt yourself. And if you just throw it, just press R1 without holding it and don't move at all, then you're going to get caught in the fire blast. So I actually had to re-record this section after doing some testing, because my theory is that if you throw the Molotov Cocktail in a cardinal direction, north, south, east, or west, that it will not hurt you. But if you throw the Molotov Cocktail in an ordinal direction, northwest, southwest, northeast, southeast, that it will hurt you. My theory is that the hitbox of the Molotov Cocktail is not a perfect circle. It's more likely a rectangle. There's a very easy way to hurt yourself with this weapon. If you're running forward and just tap R1, you're guaranteed to hurt yourself. If you hold it down a little bit more than just single tapping it, if you move away after single tapping it, you can avoid this fire. However, somebody gets close enough to you when throwing, it explodes on direct combat. That's on direct combat. When it comes into direct contact with something. The grenade is a timed release. And so that's the advantage that it has, is that it's direct contact. It's better when you're throwing it off the top of a building. If you completely hold down the grenade's throw button, it'll arc it upwards, and depending on how high the vehicle is, it'll explode before it actually reaches the ground. You don't have that problem with the Molotov Cocktail. It's gonna exist till it hits the ground and then explodes. It's more geared towards doing damage to NPCs. They catch on fire, they're pretty much guaranteed to die. Explosions are better for doing vehicle damage. The exception to this, and what the Molotov Cocktail is really good at, is doing damage to tanks. Because tanks can only be blown up by fire. Like I said, the Flamethrower is good for that, but you have to get close to the tank to do that, which is probably going to cause the people in it to get out of it. Then you've got to stop getting shot at by M16s, which are going to kill you really quickly. Setting them on fire is not necessarily going to stop them. The Molotov Cocktail provides you a safe way to dispatch of tanks, but it sort of begs the question, why do you need to blow up tanks? The only time you're going to be faced with tanks is if you have a 6-star wanted level. There are some missions that incorporate that, but you're not going to fight tanks when you're supposed to deliver something to some place with 6 stars. You're going to try to get rid of your stars and finish the mission. Same thing with just sort of messing around. Like, yeah, you can mess around and blow up tanks on top of a building, but they're just going to spawn more tanks. And then there's other way. It's not bad. It's not bad, and it has its uses. It's pretty good. It has all the same benefits that a grenade does, only it's much more dangerous. And I think that it's a detriment to have. It exists like right by the grenade. I don't like the fact that it goes before the grenade. If it went after the grenade, I'd be a bigger fan of it, but it has its uses. I've considered using it. I still consider using it, but generally I don't think it's necessary, and I think it's too much of a risk to your own health, which is like the most important thing. So Molotov Cocktail, I'm tempted to rank it even lower, but it is very good in combat. I mean, it dispatches targets pretty quickly, and in terms of pure combat, I think it's better than the other two weapons in a vacuum. So if you're skilled enough to not burn yourself alive, Molotov Cocktail is good. So that's that, and now we're getting to the weapons that really aren't so great in the game. They're good at certain things, but not necessarily great all-around weapons. And we got the shotgun. The shotgun is very disappointing to me. It is good at certain things. It is a one-hit kill, and it has a spread shot. It puts out 5 bullets that each do 100 damage, as you can see by the weapon stats. It's got a pretty slow reload speed, but it's in anything that it can target, of which it's got a slightly shorter range than pistols and Uzis. It can one-shot anything in there. And as far as the spread goes, the bullets don't penetrate, which is the worst thing about the shotgun, but if you just happen to hit multiple things with that same fan spread, it can take out multiple targets at once, but it is easier said than done. It sort of happens on accident. You can use this weapon without locking on. You can just hold down the R1 button, just like you can with the AK or the M16, but it's just not nearly as good at rotating as either of those guns. It actually slightly increases your rate of fire if you use it without locking on, but it's much easier to miss. It's just so disappointing as a weapon. It's also very good at blowing up vehicles, as anybody who's driven around, mafia territory knows. They'll blow up your vehicle before you even know what happened. Essentially, two shots from the shotgun typically either set it on fire or blow it up, depending on how close you are to the vehicle. And this is good, but at the same time, not really useful. There are lots of ways to blow up vehicles, and you're probably going to hurt yourself by doing what I just described. The other thing is where it exists on the weapon wheel is kind of problematic. You've got it right by the Uzi, right before the M16s and whatnot. Honestly, the big thing is that it is pretty much outclassed by the Flamethrower and the M16. The Flamethrower is much better at doing what the shotgun does in shotgun's range. The only advantage the shotgun has is it instantly deletes stuff, whereas Flamethrower, like I said, is damage over time. But the Flamethrower can penetrate multiple targets, it can go through walls, vehicles, and you can use it right by a vehicle without accidentally blowing up the vehicle. It takes a few seconds for the flame to do damage over time for the vehicle damage to be lethal. M16, on the other hand, also sort of outclasses the shotgun by having a very quick time to kill with just holding down the fire button and just kind of instantly deleting stuff. It will also blow up vehicles in this way, but the shotgun, it's sort of a hybrid of what both the M16 and the Flamethrower are trying to do. It doesn't do either one nearly as well, but it is a cheaper option. It's one that you get sooner. It's not the worst weapon, but it's generally outclassed by other ones. All things considered, it's not a bad weapon in combat. It's not as good as the AK. I think it's fine where it is. That brings us to the pistol. Pistol is not a bad weapon at all. The best thing about it is same benefit as the Uzi is that you're freely mobile while you use it. You can walk while firing it, you can run while holding it. And it's not a bad weapon in terms of its fire rate and damage. It does a little more damage than the Uzi, but it has a slower fire rate and a smaller clip. So obviously its time to kill is not as good. And then whenever you start getting armored targets, it's even worse. Whereas the shotgun pretty much retains its one-hit kill. The weapons with a fire faster rate really don't see that much of a difference in like armored targets and whatnot. Neither do explosions or flames. It affects a pistol, and anyone with more armor than normal has a better weapon than normal, and there's no way you're going to outdamage them with the pistol. But the good thing about it is you can just run away with the pistol. The other thing that's really great about the pistol is where it lives on the weapon wheel. It lives to the left of the Uzi. It is a weapon you can run with. It is consecutive with other weapons you can run with, the fist and, your thrown weapons. So it's very non-offensive. It doesn't get in the way. There's no real reason to use it, but it's fine at what it does. It also doesn't seem to garner as much attention in terms of wanted level as some of the other weapons, so it's more discreet. It's fine. It's just not as good as like the shotgun or the Molotov or anything above it at actually killing things. But it's mobile. It's generally a good weapon. Now we come to the sniper rifle. Sniper rifle, as weird as it is, it's the only weapon that has a zoom in the game, and it can one-shot almost everything that it shoots. So you'd think, like, this is a good weapon. But the problem is that it just gets completely outclassed by the rocket launcher and even the M16 in first person. It has better handling than either of those, but because the rocket launcher has this huge AoE, you don't need to be precise with where you're aiming the rocket launcher. You can just sort of carpet bomb whatever area you're trying to hit and kill whatever you're trying to kill. The sniper rifle, you need to have direct line of sight, you need to actually hit the thing, and up close, I mean, yeah, you can one-shot stuff, but then you actually have to have some skill to use it. So there's really only two situations I'd see where this weapon is useful. The first is that it's only useful being zoomed, so it's actually pretty useful for non-combat reasons. Like if you're a content creator, or if you just want to zoom in on things, get closer look on things, it's the only thing in the game that can do that. So it's very useful from that perspective. The other thing is if you were going to include it for combat reasons, this is essentially like a challenge mode. This is like try hard sniper challenge. I'm very good at aiming, so I'm going to use a weapon that's intentionally not very good, but very skill based. Because here's the thing. As a weapon, it's not very good, but it is also completely skill based. Meaning that if you are both bad at using this weapon and you're using it, which it's not very good, then things are just going to kill you and there's nothing you can do about it. Best thing you can do is switch off the sniper rifle. But it doesn't do very much damage to vehicles. It does one-shot most targets, but that doesn't include targets with expanded HP. Like you can see me here trying to one-shot this SWAT policeman who's got body armor, and it takes 2 shots to take him down. Now I don't know if it's different, like if you headshot it, that does more damage. That would make sense. I don't know if that's the case. I didn't test it enough, but it wouldn't make it so that all of a sudden the sniper rifle is better than the pistol or any other weapon. It's just not very good. It's more of a challenge weapon, if anything. It's in an unfortunate spot. It's in a terrible position in the weapon wheel because it's sandwiched between both of the weapons that really outclass it. There's no real reason to put this weapon on your weapon wheel from the perspective of it being a weapon, which kind of sucks. It's necessary for some missions, but like I said, you could just use the rocket launcher and not even need the sniper rifle for certain missions. Now we get to the F tier. F for fist, so the fists go here. I don't even really feel good about ranking the fist because you literally do not have a choice. You are obligated to use the fist. There's no way to remove it, so therefore you have to use it. So why should I rank this thing? Well, I believe that the fist is actually the best melee weapon in the game. And just to be clear here, it is not the most powerful melee weapon in the game. It is the best melee weapon in the game, and that's because it's not the worst. You can run with it. That's, I think, the biggest benefit, and you have to use a melee weapon, so you always have this weapon equipped. The one thing that you should say about the fist that I didn't actually know till I started testing it is that the fist gets a bonus from adrenaline. That's like that little pill drug icon that you see, and when everything goes in slow motion, you actually get super strength. I think this is a reference to like a drug-fueled frenzy. Like this is some sort of stimulant that gives you like superpowers. But essentially you get super punches and super kicks. And you'll know when it kicks in, it's not every single hit, but you will actually send your opponents flying and they will immediately die. So it's just a little fun thing with the fist. It's a benefit that it gets from taking adrenaline. It's worth noting. You have to use this weapon. It's really not even worth talking about. Like if you look at its stats, 8 damage per hit, it's clearly not very good. It's clearly not the most powerful melee weapon. I'm going to get to why it's the best when we get to the bat. And next, we've got the remote detonator. The bomb detonator, the item that you get from using 8 balls. This is how bad I think the bat is. I think that this is legitimately a better weapon, and I'll explain why. But yeah, you go into 8-ball shop, it makes it so that you can explode your car. So when you get out of the car, you have this remote. It lives right past the Molotov Cocktail and the grenade on the weapon wheel right before the fist. Once you use it, you can't be running while you're using it, just like any other weapon, but you can run with it and walk while you're using it. It blows up the vehicle that you got. It costs, I think, $3,000? It costs a certain amount of money, so until you just have gobs and gobs of cash, it's sort of unrealistic to actually purchase this thing and use it because there's so many ways to blow up vehicles. You don't even need a weapon to do that. You just need to flip it over or just crash it into things until it catches on fire. So it seems totally excessive. There's no real purpose in using it outside of missions. I mean, there's some missions where you need to use this. It's certainly not money efficient since there's a lot of the weapons that you can just get for free with hidden packages and whatnot. I still can't say it's a bad weapon for one reason and one reason alone. When you use it from your inventory, it disappears. Every other weapon, except for the fist, has the ability to get rid of it. And now we come to the worst weapon in the game, and that is the bat. I'm sorry, fans of the bat, this is the worst weapon in the game, and it is purely and simply for a few reasons. First, you cannot remove it from your inventory, that I know of. The only way to get rid of it is that you die or you get arrested. You can see where it exists here on the weapon wheel. It is extremely problematic. It is sandwiched between all the weapons that you can run with. It is a weapon that you can't run with. It gets in the way of all those. It is the most powerful melee weapon in the game. That should be said. One hit to knock somebody down on the ground, and another hit to just instantly kill them. It does 21 damage, which doesn't seem to add up. It seems like NPCs should have about 70 HP, so I guess it does additional damage when you hit someone on the ground. I don't know the exact numbers on this, but it takes 2 hits to kill. The worst thing about it is that aside from the slow-mo, it gets no benefit from adrenaline, whereas you get super punches from adrenaline. So under adrenaline, fists far and away become the best weapon because you can run with it, and it actually kills people a little bit faster than the bat does. Not under adrenaline, the bat's a little bit better, but you can't run with it. And you can't get rid of it other than all the things that I just described. So just for me personally, whenever I pick up the bat, as long as I haven't done something that's like irreplaceable, I reload my save. Like, I pick up the bat and I immediately am just like, oh, reload the save when I don't have the bat. It's like the glitter of GTA weapons. You can't get rid of it. Once it gets on you, you have to spend way more effort, getting off of you than when you originally had it. And that makes it the worst weapon in the game. If you could run with it, I'd probably rank it higher, but as it exists, this is where I see the weapons. Take your pick. Like, you don't necessarily have to use the M16. You don't necessarily have to use any of the weapons here. You could use one of the lower ones. It's fine, but this just sort of gives you an idea of how valuable each of the weapons are on the weapon wheel, where they exist on the weapon wheel, sort of like how valuable they are compared to the weapons next to them, which ones more get in the way versus which ones really add value in terms of what the weapon does. There's a bit of redundancy with some of them. Some of them provide totally unique effects, and this is where I see it. If you have different thoughts on, you think something should be ranked higher or lower, you have a different idea of how things should be used in combination together, what's your setup for your weapon wheel? What are your thoughts on the ranks? Do you think rank something too high, too low? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. This is my first tier video and my first Grand Theft Auto 3 weapon tier list. I'm Voice Chatty. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and I wish you all the best and whatever you got going on. Goodbye.